Good morning. My name is Mary Lichty Adams, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees of this congregation. Welcome to you all. The Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Elkhart is a welcoming community. Well, did you know that we're a welcoming community? Did you get that part? All right. We encourage religious freedom and nurture individual spiritual and ethical growth, celebrating diversity and promoting a just and sustainable world. If you are a visitor with us this morning, we'd like to invite you to join us for coffee and conversation after the service in the gathering place behind so that we can get to know each other better. If you have any hearing issues, this would be, there's help available for you at the sound desk, and you're welcome to go there and get something. This would be a wonderful time to turn off your cell phones or turn them to vibrate. Also, if you would like more information about us, please visit our website at uufe.org. Now enjoy the service, and we've got a wonderful service this morning with a marvelous story from one of our own.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Karen, for that wonderful presentation of Christmas music. And I would like to thank, speaking of Christmas, many thanks to Mike Darnell, Dwight Fish, Holly Reed, and Xander Reed, who decked our halls with greenery over the last week. And our mitten trees in the gathering place are starting to look quite festive. Until the end of the month, we will be welcoming additions of gloves, caps, scarves, and other warm winter wear to deck the trees. Our gifts will be donated to the women's shelter here in town. Sign-up sheets should be going around for those who would like to share Christmas dinner here at the church. Laura Snow is coordinating and hosting the meal at 1 o'clock on Sunday the 25th, Christmas Day. Good time for a Christmas dinner. And while I usually remind people not to forget events, today I'm reminding people to forget something. Science and Society is on hiatus for the month and will not meet again until January, the second Tuesday in January. So watch the focus and the update for more information as Ken reveals it. I have learned that Oksana and Dwight are fleeing to Las Vegas for a while, and we need someone to water the plants. I am not too sure when they will be back, but it will be at least a week apparently. And so talk to Mike Darnell about access to the church if you need it. And Mike and I plan to do some traveling over the 2023, and so we would like to have some substitutes for Sunday school. So I know I plan to be gone for a couple of Sundays next month. So let me know if you would like to share a story and a craft. I have things all made up in packets so they're easy to grab and easy to use. And the kids know about the great big craft box full of stuff with other things. So they're good kids and they're easy to entertain. So I try to make things interesting and UU educational too. So okay, on with the last piece of business. Last week's attendance was 56 adults in person, on Zoom and on YouTube. The offering of $156 went to our sustainability fund, and this week's offering will be shared with Church Community Services. Thank you.
We ring the gong 3 times, once for those who came before us and made a place for us. Once for those of us who are here now. And once for those who will come after us and build on the dream. Our chalice lighting this morning is by Nadine McSpadden. During our darkest moments, still there is hope. When facing our biggest challenges, still there is hope. When all we can do is put one foot in front of the other, still there is hope. When we can't find the way out, still there is hope. When all we can do to help is hold someone's hand as they cry, still there is hope. We are the hope for ourselves and for one another. Always there is hope. Please join me as we read our unison covenant, which is in your order of service and shown on the screen. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. To dwell together in peace, to speak the truth in love, and to help one another. This is our covenant. Our offering this morning can be taken now, and it is going to be shared, as Judy said, with church community services. And I will clarify, it was for church community services, and that was my boo-boo up there, sorry. We're going to have a spoken and silent meditation this morning, and the silent meditation will be begun with the gong and will be closed with the gong. It is from Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu, and it is a poem called Always We Hope. Always we hope someone else has the answer. Some other place will be better. Some other time it will all turn out. This is it. No one else has the answer. No other place will be better. And it has already turned out. At the center of your being, you have the answer. You know who you are, and you know what you want. There is no need to run outside for better seeing. nor to peer from a window. Rather abide at the center of your being. For the more you leave it, the less you learn. Search your heart and see the way to do is to be.
Take a minute to turn to number 1 and stand, and if you're willing and able, and join the hymn number 1.
Good morning. "2020 was the year we collectively could not breathe. 2020 permanently took away the breath of millions of people worldwide in the form of the coronavirus. The year 2020 also took our breath away with natural disasters like the wildfires in California, Australia, and the Amazon. George Floyd's last words in 2020 were, "I can't breathe," as a policeman crushed his windpipe with his knee. "I can't breathe" became the rallying cry of the Black Lives Matters movement. 2020 was a breath-impairing year, not just for the world, but for me personally. I retired in June of 2020, and that same month learned I had a tumor nearly blocking my entire airway. We oftentimes talk about the stages of cancer, but today I'm going to share my story in acts instead of stages, because the more acts you get, the longer you get to live, right? Not like stages. So we're going to do acts instead. So Act 1. The curtain opens to the scene of me wandering, lost in the wilderness. I knew something was wrong with my breathing and my voice for over 4 years, but nobody could figure out what was going on. Actually, oddly enough, I first noticed something wrong right here at UUFE. Why, you may ask? because we sang hymns after hymns. And by the last hymn, my voice had entirely given out, which was something that had never happened to me before. And it got worse over the years. In fact, I was barely whispering the hymns by the end. I saw different doctors during this time and had an ultrasound, had 2 years before my actual diagnosis, I had a CT scan and a bronchoscope exam and look at my vocal cords. I had all kinds of diagnoses. Vocal strain, weak vocal cords, allergies, I was given steroids, I was given inhalers. I even was sent for a round of physical voice therapy. Voice therapy? How strange is that? None of it helped at all, of course, as you will find. I was really frustrated by this time because I was having a hard time breathing. I was wheezing when I went up and down stairs, and the inhalers didn't help at all. So I decided to go back to that same ENT I'd gone to before. ENT stands for ear, nose, and throat doctor, for my second bronchoscope exam in 2 years. So a bronchoscope, in case you don't know, is a thin tube with a little camera on the end of it. And they feed that down through your nose, down to your vocal cords. But first they do squirt a little bit of numbing spray into your nose so that you don't fight that going down. But still, you know something's going down, right? Not that pleasant of an experience. So this time, when the scope got to the level of my vocal cords, the ENT could not hide the look of shock on his face in time. And then he said words that I will never forget. There's something in your throat that shouldn't be there. He followed this with a memorable and rather laughable line, but it's probably not cancer. Well, you know, I've been dealing with this now for 4 years and thinking that on many occasions, and of course I thought this is probably cancer. I don't even know why he said that. At any rate, he was panicked enough to very quickly order another CT scan and then send me to a specialist in South Bend. That specialist, once I got there, he numbed my throat for the bronchoscope procedure, which is beginning to become familiar, and I've now had dozens and dozens of times since. And he left the exam room after he numbed me, and he was gone so long that the numbing wore off. By the time he came back in to do the exam, I couldn't tolerate it. He didn't repeat the numbing, and my throat filled up with mucus, and I stopped breathing. It was a pretty scary experience. He removed the scope without any evident concern for my discomfort while I wheezed and choked and coughed and blew my nose. And then he displayed the photo of what was in my throat. This is the first time I have actually seen this myself. And it would look kind of like the Blob, you know, the old movies about the Blob. This big whitish thing right below my vocal cords, and it was shot through with red veins. And it was blocking about 80% of my airway. No wonder I couldn't breathe. You know, nothing was going to help that, right? He said, without a doubt, it's cancer. Well, this wasn't a surprise, and I wasn't shocked by this statement. By this time, I'd certainly figured that out myself. But it was his next words that stopped me in my tracks. We'll have to do an immediate biopsy with tracheostomy. Tracheostomy? You mean a breathing tube in my neck? How long will that be in place? He said it'll be there indefinitely, most likely permanently. Well, any remaining air I had left in me left at that moment, and my heart plummeted. I don't remember much more about that unpleasant afternoon, other than staggering outside to my husband and son who waited outdoors for me. This was during COVID, and I attended this and all of my appointments, almost all of them, by myself, because Chuck wasn't allowed to come in with me. Nobody was allowed in with me. We did the phone thing a few times, you know, trying to connect with each other. I was also tested for COVID more times than I can even count in those years, because to even enter a hospital or a doctor's office, you had to be tested and tested. I can tell you about every kind of test there possibly is. So the next morning, after emotionally recovering from this terrible experience I had there, I called and immediately canceled that procedure. I did not know what I was going to do at that point, but I knew that I was not going to commit myself to the hands of that unfeeling individual. So the curtain comes down on Act 1 with me standing, clenched fist center stage with a determined look on my face. Act 2. I realized if I was going to need a biopsy that could result in me not breathing normally for the rest of my life, I'd better get to a major hospital quick. With the help of my son Jordan, who's here today, I was able to get an appointment very quickly at the Mayo Clinic where I was able to get a biopsy without a tracheostomy. It pays to find the most experienced people when you're having something very complex done. So, learned what kind of cancer I have. The most common throat cancer is squamous cell. You've probably heard of that. And the most common cause is smoking. Well, I had neither squamous cell nor had I ever smoked in my life. So my diagnosis was something called adenoid cystic carcinoma. Now that's kind of a confusing title because it does not originate in the adenoids. It has nothing to do with the adenoids. Why is that word in there? I don't know. I didn't name it. It's a salivary gland cancer. And you actually have thousands of salivary glands in your neck and around your mouth, many more than you know. And then one doctor said to me, did they ever figure out which gland it came from? And I said, no. And he said, I'm not surprised. Some of them are microscopically small, and we don't generally ever find out. ACC for short, adenoid cystic carcinoma, is a rare cancer of the salivary glands with no known cause. It is not caused by genetics. Chemotherapy and immunotherapy are entirely ineffective against it. The only potential effective treatment is surgical removal of the tumor and radiation. Given the location of the tumor in my windpipe, nearly touching my left vocal cord, the oncologist told me the only surgical option for me was total laryngectomy. A laryngectomy is a procedure where they remove the entire voice box and put a permanent breathing tube at the base of your neck in your windpipe. Because of the drastic nature of this treatment, I got opinions from 4 more oncologists at top cancer hospitals who all said exactly the same thing. I tell you this in a calm way now, but at the time I was utterly devastated. Losing one's voice is a primal fear, the nightmare where you're trying to scream but can't make a sound. The loss of the ability to breathe normally through your nose and through your mouth means a loss of normal speech, singing, even what I just now did would have been impossible. It also means no swimming or being in a boat around the water, and I'm a real boat water nut. If you fall in the water, there's no way to prevent water from flowing into that tube in your neck and you'll drown. The thought of a mechanical voice box that people with tracheostomy and laryngectomy sometimes have also made me break out in a cold sweat. How would I talk to my grandchildren without frightening them because of Grandma's weird voice? The curtain falls on Act 3 with me sitting, head in hands, in the gray light of despair. Act 3. Act 3 opens with me remembering Act 1, when I said no to the first plan of a biopsy with tracheostomy. I decided not to give up yet, despite overwhelming evidence I should just accept my fate. Here's when one's support team becomes critical. Chuck found an online community for ACC patients. I learned a lot from people in this group. I asked who was the best person to consult, and one doctor came up over and over again. He is a thoracic surgeon in Boston whom people with tracheal issues consult with. We were able to get an appointment with him, and after reviewing my case, he said, "Come to Boston. There are things we can consider before a laryngectomy." Music to our ears. Cut to the scene of Chuck and Karen driving to Boston. So you may be wondering, how could so many top doctors agree with one another on my treatment, and why did one have a different answer? And why did I take that answer and not all the others? It's not that the first 5 oncologists were wrong. They all work from the same playbook, something called standard of care. Standard of care is actually a set of documents telling doctors how to treat various diseases. It's a vast tome, tome of information. Standard of care is deeply connected to the health insurance industry and medical malpractice. A doctor's decision to deviate from standard of care in treating patients creates a lot of legal issues and reputational risk to that doctor and the institutions that they work in. That's why all the oncologists I consulted had the same solution for me. I've since actually seen the standard of care page for ACC of the trachea, and it's a remarkably short entry with the words total laryngectomy and not a whole lot else in there. Now keep in mind, there are about 1,200 cases of ACC per year in the United States. Very rare. Of those 1,200, about 80 of them are found in the trachea, even rarer. Of those found in the trachea, only an extremely small percentage are found next to the vocal cords. So rare that nobody knows what to do about it. Hence, this drastic solution without a lot of other evidence for any other ways to treat it. I had a nurse tell me, get another opinion somewhere else. We've never seen this here before. And it was in a huge cancer center. They'd never seen it before. So in other words, 99% of oncologists, I could have kept consulting oncologists for the rest of my life, and they would have all said the same thing because they would have all gone to that one little paragraph, and that's what they would have seen. So why didn't that one doctor say the same thing? Now, you may be wondering that. Well, guess what? He's not an oncologist. He's a thoracic surgeon, and he plays from another part of that playbook, the playbook about tracheal issues. In fact, he pioneered several different kinds of surgery for the trachea, which is why I was recommended to see him. Before he actually had examined me, he was kind of hoping he might be able to do something called tracheal resection on me. But after I was examined, it was determined that the tumor was just too close to the vocal cord for that to be successful. But we were already there, and he said, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do something called cryoablation and freeze part of the tumor so that you can receive radiation therapy without the tumor swelling and blocking off the rest of your airway. And I think that you're going to be just fine with that. And if we ever needed the other drastic measures, we'll take them, but I don't think we'll even need to go there. So I had the procedure done there. He froze about 80% of the tumor, 40% of the tumor, and left about 60% of it. Why? Because you can't get too close to the edge of the trachea without damaging it with freezing or burning or any other kind of removal. So he can only take enough to leave me breathing room and swelling room for radiation treatment. But I could breathe remarkably better. Boy, that 40% really, that first breath when I came out of anesthesia was a glorious moment. So there was also a bit of tumor outside of my trachea, underneath the left thyroid gland. So it wasn't, because it came from the salivary glands, it wasn't just inside my trachea, it was also outside. So we met with an oncologist while we were in Boston. He said ACC is slow growing, especially the type that I have, and I'll manage this disease the rest of my life. More like a chronic condition than a cancer in a way. And he said the patients of his who are diagnosed with this non-aggressive type of ACC have an otherwise normal life. During this time, my dear friend Royanne, who had recovered from breast cancer a year earlier, said to me in her typical cavalier way, "Why worry? You'll probably die of something else anyway." Sadly, just 3 months after she said that, she died of a stroke, not of cancer. She and I were friends for 62 years. I was nearly undone by this latest loss in the midst of a year that seemed to hold nothing but loss for me. After we returned from Boston in August, I had decisions to make regarding my next step, because I had not had a definitive treatment yet. I just had a debulking. I was feeling a lot better, but I'd not made any decisions yet. You know, there's more than one way to do radiation. I didn't know that. There's lots of different kinds of radiation, as it turns out. And the problem is the trachea is a very fragile area of your body, and you have your spine right behind it. And the typical radiation that travels all the way through your body also damages everything on the way, and including your cervical spine. So I wasn't so game for that, but I didn't quite know what to do. So I went back to my support group, and sure enough, more recommendations came forward. And we learned of a doctor in California who's done about 700 cases of ACC using a radiation therapy called brachytherapy, which you've probably heard of in regards to prostate cancer or lung cancer, where it's more commonly used. But he also had pioneered using it in and around the trachea. So we talked to him. He said, "Come on out." Now we're heading to the other coast. Cut to the scene of Chuck and Karen flying to the other coast. So, in the midst of this, I was thinking about what else to do about my health. You know, I've been not that healthy up until now. The last 5-year period before my retirement, I was overwhelmed with family caregiving activities. My mother had dementia and was moving through all of the final stages of her life. We had welcomed 4 new grandchildren in rapid succession, which was very lovely, but it was also very stressful and took a lot of energy, and I wasn't taking care of myself. So I decided if I could create a body that was hospitable to cancer, perhaps I could create a body that was not hospitable to cancer. And I really went to work learning about all of my health conditions that I had and fixing them and improving my diet, throwing out the junk food, starting to exercise for the first time in many years, and I just began to take care of myself. The symbolism of a cancer that was literally strangling me to get my attention, to pay attention to my own needs, was not lost on me. So I began reading extensively on both traditional and non-traditional methods of treating cancer. After all, I had a rare cancer that nobody knew how to treat. You might as well consider all options, right? I learned what foods and supplements a person might take that could help you fight cancer. I learned about pathways to cancer that were fed by various things you might be doing that you ought to take out of your lifestyle and things you ought to put back in. And I just wanted to be sure I was ready for anything that came down the pipe next for me, that my body was ready. So, Chuck and Karen are on their way to California, December of 2020, at the height of COVID. Airport looked like a ghost town. Here we were in our mask, full plastic face shields, getting on the airplane, and there weren't very many people even on that airplane. It was pretty crazy. It was pretty crazy. So we get to California. The Boston Hospital has sent my scans out to them. I've had PET scans, CT scans, all of the stuff. And these scans, my oncologist in California compared to what he was seeing as he was preparing to put these radiation pellets into my neck. Now these little radiation pellets are about the size of a seed of rice, uncooked. Very, very tiny. And he was prepared to put them inside my trachea and outside to treat that whole area, about 30 of them. I got 30 little titanium seeds in my neck. I'm not magnetic or anything, though, as I found out, because they're so small. But anyway, he said, he came rushing out. He was looking at my scans, the old ones and the new ones, and he said, "We thought we had the wrong person's scans here." And I said, "Why?" He said, "The part in your throat, there should still have been 60% of that tumor left. There's nothing there. It's gone. It's completely gone. And the part outside of your trachea is 70% receded in 4 months." "How could that be?" He said, "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." And I'm like, "Well, don't you want to know what I've been doing?" Well, it's called the abscopal effect. And sometimes when you damage a tumor, the body recognizes that it's there and goes after it and attacks it. The immune system takes care of it. My immune system became strong enough during that time to take care of that tumor. most of it. I kind of thought about, let's not go ahead with this. Let's just call it a. But I went ahead with the radiation treatment. And within a couple of weeks, I had the typical painful swallowing because it burns not only your trachea, but your esophagus, and I had to, drink the lidocaine stuff. But it wasn't really too bad, and it resolved completely in a few weeks, and I have had no side effects since. My voice is not as strong as it used to be, and you can probably hear that. And my voice will be tired when I'm done with talking to you today, but it's a voice, and it is my voice. So I wish I could say that Act 3 ended with a big old celebration of all of this healing and all the great things that had happened, but it actually ends with my mom's death on December 30th, 2020. As I said I wasn't going to do this. As a result of advanced dementia and COVID. As Act 3 closes, I am once again decked by the devils of 2020. But we do get to Act 4. Act 4 opens with my follow-up appointment with my oncologist in Chicago. It's May 2021. All is still clear in my neck. I can talk, sing. I don't sing very well anymore, but I can sing, swim, breathe, and I can play my flute. Now, this doesn't mean I'm totally out of the woods yet. As I learned from my research, ACC is a master of disguise, and it grows undetected for many, many years. In fact, one oncologist said, "You probably had this for 10 years." It isn't usually diagnosed until stage 4, and by this time it is relocated to other parts of your body. So my thinking was, when I learned all of this, okay, it's probably already someplace else. Why lose my voice, which isn't going to be curative for me anyway? So I was very glad with my decision to not do that. And sure enough, in my first PET scan in Boston, they did see microscopic particles in my lungs. And this is the most common place that ACC migrates to, is to the lungs. 80% of people get it there. So they were too small to diagnose at that time, but by May of 2021, we were beginning to see them a little bit more, and they've grown slightly each and every time I get a scan. The largest one is about the size of the tip of my little finger, and my doctor's like, "Not gonna worry, we'll treat this if and when we need to." Very slow growing. Another oncologist said, "Yeah, I've got an 84-year-old woman that's had this for 20 years and her lungs are clear full of these things, and we're still not treating them, and she's fine." So I don't intend to act on them at this time. If they ever need to be treated, I do have a plan. I have doctors I trust now who I feel like really know what they're talking about. And personally, I visualize each and every day that these things are resolving. So that's how I like to think about it. At the beginning of Act 4, Karen is quite different than Act 1 Karen. I have no lingering health issues. My blood work looks better than it has ever looked. Boy, you ought to see my cholesterol numbers. Somebody ought to frame that puppy. I walk 3 miles a day most days. I rode my bike over 200 miles this fall. I've not felt this well in 15 years. Do I look good? Despite these dramatic improvements, though, my mental health still had a ways to go. Each time I went to another doctor appointment or got another scan, it triggered traumatic memories. I became hypervigilant, looking over my shoulder, always trying to anticipate and head off the next terrible loss. I'd quit using my support team because I thought I didn't have any need of it anymore. How wrong I was. My world was dominated with disease information overload. A tendency to notice every little twinge and rush to the internet to study. This was robbing me of time to do more fulfilling things. I felt distracted and disengaged at times. I looked around my environment, the books, the health-related emails, the podcasts, my Facebook feed. It was continuously bombarding me with disease imagery. These feeds were not supporting me, they were just flooding me with the sad and stories of sick and dying people. I'd been retired for 2 years, but had yet to truly engage in any of my personal interests. Those instincts to gather information and save myself that had initially helped me so much were now weighing me down. My greatest strength became my greatest flaw. I needed help. Act 4, Scene 2, opens with me finding a competent therapist. She listened and talked about things like grief, survivor guilt, and feelings that my health conditions were punishment for past mistakes. I learned that these reactions are typical in people with a serious illness. I learned that many people with an illness struggle with post-traumatic stress. In fact, those who are close to a loved one with an illness oftentimes suffer with PTSD as well. So, in order to decrease my stress, I changed my environment. I unfollowed the negative Facebook feeds and replaced them with, well, a lot of funny ones, actually. A lot of humor sites I'm on now. And he tells me jokes all the time. They're not always that funny. But that's almost what's funny about them, is that they're actually not always that funny. Oh, there you go. Okay. I unsubscribed from a dozen email feeds. I put the cancer books in the basement, and I surrounded myself with positive imagery. I began focus on doing the things I enjoyed. I started playing my flute again. Would you believe I just got that thing out of the case the 1st of November? I haven't played for 20 years. I joined the community orchestra at Greencroft. I gave more time to writing and doing genealogy research, which is a hobby I enjoy. It's good to be alive and present again. The curtain goes down on Act 4 as I breathe deeply of all that life has to offer. I can't wait to see what Act 5 holds.
Thanks, Steve. Yes, we're going to have time now, so come back up, Karen, and we're going to have time for reflections and questions, and I'll get the other mic going here.
Oh, good, that'll give me a chance to get a drink of water.
Okay. Who?
I have a suggestion for Act 5.
Okay.
You now have everybody in this room heard your story, and now we can celebrate with you for as long as you're around, and we'll be with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
My dad lived to 98, and in his 90s he would say, gee, if I knew were going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself. And that's something none of us can know, is how long we have. And the body that we are in needs maintenance and needs care and loving. And my dad's body was decomposing in his 90s, and he knew it, and so made the comment, if I knew I were going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself.
My sister-in-law is 97, and she's not doing very well right now. She has Alzheimer's, but I don't know how long ago it was. It was at least 20 or maybe 25 years ago. She had diabetes, and instead of taking drugs, she started changing her eating habits, and she got by up until maybe 5 years ago, where she didn't need drugs for diabetes. The other thing is, my daughter's a naturopathic doctor in California, and their philosophy, and let me say that she has every bit as much education as medical doctors do, And their philosophy is instead of taking drugs, you just eat better and have exercise and do those things, and your body will take care of itself. I haven't learned that yet.
Glad to hear that Chuck was very supportive of you.
Always, always.
Yes. Also, while we're friends on Facebook, I've got to say that it really didn't come across in Facebook, your Facebook feeds, that you were going through all this. Also, a question for Chuck. With everything she's learned about improving her health, has any of it rubbed off on you?
Thanks, Rich. I'm going to go on to a comment here. Of course. I see a comment from Karen Fazette here on Zoom, a great reminder to not accept the first thing that comes to you if it feels wrong.
Karen, thank you so much for sharing this. And I have to tell you, I'm sitting here still in absolute amazement what hell you've gone through. And I keep asking myself, especially while I was listening to you, what was the driving force that kept you going on?
I didn't want to lose my voice. I think having something, that was extremely rare, and I understood there was not a known path for doctors to run on, even top doctors in the world, freed me up from being traditional, and B, the notion they were going to take away this, well, if it had been breast cancer or colon cancer or something kind of known and that people know what to do about, I'm not sure I'd have done any of the things I did. It was that combination.
Karen, when you finished, I started to very quietly clap. And I think that would be a good thing to do now.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know, it's really good to step away and look and see what your options are. But I want you to think about what you gave your grandchildren and the other younger people inside your family, because everybody is putting all their faith in the regular treatment, and that's what we have to get away from. And so I want you to think about what you gave your family by caring about what was most important to you, was being able to talk and to sing and to play your flute and to stay alive. Mm-hmm. Like, you're a big deal.
Thank you. I'm not sure about that. I'm a pretty ordinary deal, but I do want to give a little credit to my mother here. My mother's the one that taught me to question things. She was a big advocate for herself. In fact, a doctor said, "Oh, you have a tumor in your breast." A local doctor, "We're going to remove both breasts." And she said, "No, thank you." Went to Mayo Clinic, found out it was a benign cyst, and had it removed there, and end of story. So she's the one that taught me to advocate for myself and question everything. And read. Learn.
Well, if there isn't anything else, I'm going to get the last word, which is sometimes doesn't happen too often. Yes, it's a joke. Oh, all I want to say here before I put the mic back up is that, imagine if you're at Mayo Clinic and the doctor says, "This is what needs to be done." Imagine if you're at Cleveland Clinic and the doctor says, "This is what needs to be done," and more, and they're in agreement. I just have to, applaud my wife for kind of saying, I still think there's a better way. I still think there is.
For me. For me.
For her. And the other thing I want to add too is that Karen has been a remarkable source of support for some other people in the ACC world. We had a woman in Warsaw who came up and visited with us, who found her through the support group, and who was about a week away from the laryngectomy. She had already had a tracheostomy in place, which could be reversed, but she was about a week away from a laryngectomy and found a better way. So her story still unfolds too, but Karen's really been a remarkable source of support for folks.
Let me remind you that we have a tradition since COVID that we will sit after Karen makes her final remarks to listen to the postlude by Lizzie. And I'm kind of anal about the hymns we sing, and I've kept track ever since I've been coming to this church how many times we sing each hymn. We've sung this one probably 6 or 8 times in the last 7 years. But after today, this is Karen's hymn. Please stand if you're willing and able. Number 6.
I'd like to close by quoting a passage from Dr. Alyssa Rankin's book, Sacred Medicine. The breath is literally inspiration, to inspire, from the roots of in spirit. In many spiritual traditions, the breath is seen as our spiritual essence, as God, if you will. Meditation techniques ask us to focus on the breath. Yoga is about pranayama, breath work. Even creation myths begin with God breathing life into the world. Human life begins with a baby's first breath outside its mother and ends when we take our last. Breath is life force. Breath animates us. Breath is the difference between life and death, and it became clear in 2020 that way too many of us were being smothered. May we never again experience a year where we are left without breath. May we always breathe fully with gratitude, the gift of life.